The ration line collapsed at 1100 hours, and Marcus Vale saw it happen from 30 meters away. The crowd folding inward like a wave breaking wrong, the thin wail of small bodies caught underneath adult panic. He was already running. The distribution point at Sector 9 had been orderly for 6 weeks. 6 weeks of Marcus standing at the head of that line with his clipboard and his calm voice, and his absolute refusal to let the hegemony logistics officers short the count. 6 weeks of watching the Drevari children, blue-skinned, hollow-cheeked, too quiet for their age, clutch their ration chits in both hands like prayers. 6 weeks of making it work through sheer stubbornness, and the fact that nobody in the hegemony administration wanted to be the one who killed a UN relief coordinator on camera. Now the line was gone, scattered, trampled in places. Marcus shoved through the press of adult Drevari bodies, most of them stumbling back from whatever had broken the queue. He found the cause 10 seconds later. The distribution terminal was dark. Not cycling, not displaying the next number, dark. Dead. And the announcement board above it read, in 3 languages including the hegemony's angular script, RATIONS suspended, Sector 9 deactivated by order of the Provisional Authority. Someone had shut them off. Marcus knelt. There, wedged between an overturned supply crate and the base of the terminal pillar, was a small Drevari child, mint-green skin gone pale at the edges, silver hair matted to her temples, wide amber eyes fixed on him with that expression he'd learned to read over 6 weeks. Not fear. Not yet. Something before fear. The recognition that the world had just become less safe. He lifted her out. She weighed almost nothing, less than a human child her size would have, as if the Drevari skeleton were hollow in places, built for a thinner atmosphere on some world far from here. "It's all right," he said, though it wasn't. He set her on her feet, checked her limbs, nothing broken, just the tremor of someone small who'd been stepped over by a crowd that wasn't watching where it moved. She clutched a folded ration chit in her left hand, the paper soft with handling, the edges worn translucent. "That's still good," he told her, pointing at the chit. "That's still yours." She looked at him. Then she looked at the dead terminal, then back at him. Her ears pointed, delicate, too large for her narrow face pressed flat against her skull. He understood what she was asking. "I'll fix it," Marcus said. He couldn't fix it. He knew that within the hour. The Provisional Authority's order wasn't a glitch. It was policy. Sector 9 housed the largest concentration of unaccompanied Drevari minors on the station. 461 children registered under Marcus's relief mandate, most of them orphaned during the hegemony's annexation campaign 3 years prior. The authority had been looking for a reason to consolidate them into the labor training pipeline for months. Cutting their independent rations was step 1. Step 2 would be reclassification. Change their status from protected minors under interstellar humanitarian mandate to unclaimed dependents of the Provisional Authority. Once that happened, Marcus's jurisdiction evaporated. The children would be moved to intake facilities on the outer ring. After that, the training camps on Cassara Minor. Everyone knew what happened at Cassara Minor. The supply manifests alone told the story. Caloric intake listed per head at levels that would sustain an adult Drevari for physical labor, but leave a growing child's bones softening within 6 months. Marcus had seen those numbers. He'd filed complaints about those numbers. The complaints had been acknowledged and filed and answered with silence. Marcus sat in his office, a converted storage bay with a desk he'd built from shipping pallets, and stared at the order on his screen. The language was careful, legal. It cited regulatory subsections and operational efficiency clauses. It mentioned welfare optimization 3 times. It did not mention children. His comms beeped. Yara Kenning, his logistics deputy, the only other human on the station. "They've already posted guards at the distribution hub," she said. Her voice was flat with controlled fury. 2 hegemony compliance officers. They're turning families away. I watched a woman try to argue her registration number. They scanned it. It came up void. The system's already been purged. The children who came alone. Scattered, some went back to their registered shelters. Some are just out there, in the corridors. The older ones took the younger ones. They're grouping up the way they do when they don't know what's happening. Marcus closed his eyes. 461. Some of them were old enough to understand what a dead terminal meant. Most weren't. They only knew the routine. Wake, queue, show the chit, receive the block. The routine was how they knew the universe still worked. How long before they reclassify? He asked. 72 hours. The order has a processing window. After that, our mandate doesn't cover them. 3 days. He had 3 days to feed 461 children through channels that no longer existed, keep them registered under his authority, and prevent the Provisional Authority from physically collecting them, all while operating inside a system that had just declared them someone else's property. Marcus opened his eyes. He picked up his jacket, the heavy gray one with the UN humanitarian patch on the shoulder, frayed at the cuffs from 2 years of wear. He shrugged it on. "Get me Talvek," he said. Talvek was Drevari. Old in a species that showed age through the darkening of their skin from its natural blue-green toward deep indigo. His fingers were stained with decades of chalk dust from his teaching years. The pigment worked so deep into the whorls of his skin that no amount of washing removed it. He'd been a teacher before the annexation, literature, philosophy, the kind of subjects that occupying powers defunded first. Now he ran a prayer hall in Sector 12 that officially held services twice daily and unofficially served as the only gathering point where adult Drevari could speak without hegemony audio surveillance. Marcus found him cleaning the hall's front steps with a bucket of gray water and a brush that had seen better decades. "They shut down 9, Marcus said without preamble. Talvek didn't stop brushing. "I heard. The corridor networks carry sound faster than your comms. I need to move food." 72 hours, 461 mouths. The old Drevari straightened. His joints cracked audibly. His eyes, the same amber shade as the child Marcus had pulled from the rubble of the queue, studied the human with an expression that combined assessment and something that might have been respect, or might have been pity for a man who didn't know what he was stepping into. "You mean to defy the order?" "I mean to feed children who are legally still under my mandate. The order suspends distribution from the terminal. It does not revoke their ration entitlement. It does not reclassify them yet. For 72 hours they are still mine to feed. The authority just removed the mechanism." Talvik set down his brush. "So you build a new mechanism?" "Yes. And you understand that building it means trusting people you have not earned the right to trust. My people have survived 3 years under this occupation by keeping our movements invisible to outsiders. You are asking us to make you visible inside our invisibility." Marcus held his gaze. "I am asking you to help me feed your children." A long silence. Somewhere in the lower corridors, a maintenance drone hummed past. Talvek's gaze drifted toward the prayer hall's interior, the rows of low benches, the alcoves where Drevari families had hidden during the first raids 3 years ago, the scuff marks on the floor that told stories if you knew how to read them. "There are routes," Talvik said, "maintenance corridors, service ducts between sectors. The hegemony sealed some during the annexation, but not all. My people have been using them for other things." Marcus didn't ask what other things. He didn't need to know, and Talvik didn't need the liability of having told him. "Can they carry ration packs?" "They can carry whatever fits through a half-meter conduit access point." "Then I need runners, adults who know the routes, and I need distribution points, places the children already go, places the compliance officers won't think to watch." Talvik's lips pressed together. the expression on a Dravari face that meant the equivalent of a human's grim smile, the muscles pulling inward rather than outward, the lips thinning rather than curving. "The prayer halls," he said. "The water reclamation bays, children go there to fill canteens. The officers ignore it because the task is beneath their attention. The old creche on deck 14, it's been decommissioned for a year, but the children still gather in the yard because no one told them to stop. The workshop bay where your predecessor set up the schoolroom. All of those every shift, starting tonight. You understand," Talvik said carefully, "that if they catch you moving supplies through unofficial channels, your diplomatic immunity means nothing. This isn't Earth. This isn't even a system where Earth has treaty leverage. You are one human on a station that answers to the hegemony." Marcus met his eyes. "I understand. And you'll do it regardless. They're children, Talvik. They're hungry. The rest is paperwork." The old Dravari picked up his brush again. He dunked it in the gray water and resumed scrubbing. But he spoke as he worked, and what he spoke were names, routes, access codes to maintenance hatches that shouldn't have been accessible, times when the corridor patrols cycled through their blind spots, the precise duration of each gap, 40 seconds here, 90 there, a full 3 minutes in the junction near Deck 7 where 2 patrol routes diverged. Marcus memorized every word. By nightfall, the network was operational. It wasn't elegant. Marcus had spent 6 hours commandeering supplies from the still active sectors. Sectors 4 through 8 still had functioning distribution, and their allocations included a small surplus buffer that existed precisely for emergencies. He filed the requisitions under Emergency Supplemental for Adjacent Sector Shortfall, which was technically accurate and would survive approximately 1 audit before someone noticed the volume. He didn't need it to survive more than 1 audit. He needed 72 hours. Yara handled the logistics, breaking the bulk ration packs into smaller units that could be carried through the maintenance corridors without requiring powered transport. Standard ration blocks, nutrient paste tubes, water purification tablets. Nothing fancy. Enough to keep a small body running for 24 hours per unit. She worked in the storage bay with a pocket scale and a knife, sectioning blocks to precise weights, wrapping them in thermal insulation strips so they'd survive the temperature variance in the unheated corridors. The runners were Dravari volunteers, 12 adults from Talvik's network, people who'd been moving information, and occasionally people through the station's hidden geography since the annexation began. They knew the ducts, the timing of patrols, the blind spots in surveillance coverage. They'd been doing this for 3 years. Adding ration packs to their cargo was, as one of them told Marcus with a look of dark amusement, less dangerous than what we usually carry. Marcus didn't ask about that either. The first distribution happened at 2200 hours in the old creche yard on Deck 14. Marcus went himself. He needed to see it work, needed to solve problems in real time, needed to know in his bones whether this was possible or whether he was building a fantasy out of desperation. He carried a pack on his back like the runners did, moving through a maintenance corridor so narrow he had to turn sideways at 2 points, ducking under pipes that sweated condensation in the station's lower thermal gradient. The pack weighed 14 kilograms, his shoulders burned by the halfway point. The runners did this carrying 20. He emerged into the creche yard through a ventilation access panel that Talvik's people had modified years ago. The lock disengaged silently. The panel swung on oiled hinges that didn't exist in any maintenance record. The yard was dim, lit only by the station's emergency track lighting, but Marcus could see them, small shapes arranged in clusters on the yard's foam mat flooring. 37 children, the count Yara had given him for this location, some sleeping, some sitting upright, knees drawn to chests, watching the dark with those enormous amber and emerald eyes that caught whatever light existed and held it. A Dravari woman, one of Talvik's runners, her name was Setha, was already there, distributing packs from a first delivery. She moved between the clusters with the practiced quiet of someone who'd done this before in other contexts, her feet finding the mats without looking, her hands extending packs at the exact height a small sitting child could reach without standing. No urgency in her movements. No sound louder than a whisper. Marcus set down his pack and helped. The children took the ration blocks without speaking. Some of them recognized him. He saw the flicker of something in their expressions, the way their ears tilted forward rather than pressing flat. Not trust exactly. Familiarity. The human from the line. The one who counted them and made sure the numbers were right. A small one, the same child from the collapsed line, he realized. The mint-green girl with the silver hair appeared at his elbow. She held up her ration chit. The folded paper, soft with handling. Marcus crouched to her level. "You don't need that tonight," he said quietly. "This one's free." She looked at the ration block in his hand, then at the chit. Then she tucked the chit carefully into her sleeve and took the block with both hands. She didn't eat it immediately. She held it against her chest like something precious, the way a human child might hold a letter from someone far away. "What's your name?" Marcus asked. She stared at him for a long moment. Her amber eyes were steady, assessing him with a gravity that no child should have needed to develop. Then, barely audible, "Rivet." "Rivet, I'll be back tomorrow, same time." She nodded once, a single downward motion of her small pointed chin. Then she retreated into her cluster, 3 other small ones, all pressed together on a single mat, sharing warmth in the station's always cool recycled air. One of them reached for her immediately, small green fingers curling around her wrist, checking she was still there. Marcus stood. His chest hurt in a way that had nothing to do with the narrow corridors. Setha touched his arm as he moved toward the access panel. "The count was right," she whispered. 37, all accounted for, all fed. "Good, the other points." Comms from the runners say the water reclamation bay on 7 is complete, 44 served. The prayer hall on 12 is still in progress. Talvik is handling it personally. The workshop schoolroom had a complication. Marcus stopped. "What kind?" One of the children there, an older boy, refused to take a ration from anyone except you. Said he'd only take food from the human with the clipboard. He's been telling the other children that if the system didn't give it, it might be poison. Marcus closed his eyes. A reasonable fear for a child who'd survived the annexation. A rational response from someone small who'd learned that gifts from strangers were how traps began. "I'll go there next," he said. He crawled back through the maintenance corridor, his empty pack light on his back, and emerged 40 minutes later at the workshop schoolroom on deck 9. The boy was waiting, 12 years old by Drevari reckoning, gangly, his indigo-tinted skin marking him as older than most, his expression locked in the defensive stillness of someone who'd made a decision and would not be moved from it. Marcus sat on the workshop floor beside him, didn't tower, didn't loom, just sat. "My name is Marcus," he said. "I run the ration line in Sector 9. You've seen me there." The boy's ears twitched, forward then flat, then forward again in decision. "The terminal is dead," the boy said. His comment was heavily accented but clear. "If the terminal is dead, the food is not authorized. Unauthorized food comes from people who want something." "What do you think I want?" The boy stared at him. "Everyone wants something from Drevari children." The sentence hit Marcus like a fist. He absorbed it, held still. "You're right," he said. "Everyone does want something. The authority wants to reclassify you. The hegemony wants you in their training pipeline. Your own people want you safe but can't always manage it." He paused. "I want to feed you, that's all. I want you to have a ration block in your stomach tonight so that tomorrow you're strong enough to decide for yourself who you trust." The boy's eyes, dark amber, nearly brown, searched Marcus's face for a long time. Whatever he found there, it was enough. He extended his hand. Marcus gave him a ration block. The boy bit into it immediately. No hesitation once the decision was made, as though the hunger he'd been controlling through sheer will came rushing back the moment he let it. "My name is Keth," the boy said between bites. "I'll tell the others. If it comes from you, it's real." Marcus nodded, "Thank you." He made it back to his office at 0100 hours, filed the surplus requisitions for the next day's supply, set his alarm for 0500. The compliance officers would begin their morning patrols at 0600, and he needed to be visible at his desk, looking like a man who'd slept. He did not sleep. The second day began with a visit. Overseer Kethis, the Provisional Authority sector administrator, appeared in Marcus's office at 0800. He was Valathi, not Drivari, taller, gray-scaled, with the angular build and flat dark eyes of the species that had managed the hegemony's annexation bureaucracy for a century. He wore his rank in the silver threading of his collar and the way he didn't knock. Coordinator Vale, not a greeting, a label. Overseer Marcus didn't stand. The Sector 9 distribution terminal has been deactivated per Provisional Order 7743. You've been notified. I have. The protected minor registrations under your mandate are being processed for status reassessment. You'll receive the formal reclassification notice within 72 hours. I'm aware of the timeline. Kethis's flat eyes studied him. Something in the alien's posture shifted, the faint recalculation of someone who'd expected a protest and received instead a statement of fact. You seem calm, Coordinator. I've read the order. It's within the authority's procedural rights. I disagree with it. I've filed formal objections through the correct channels. Until the 72 hours expire and the reclassification is confirmed, those children remain under my humanitarian mandate, and I will continue to fulfill that mandate by whatever means remain available to me. Whatever means. Within the law, Overseer, always within the law. Kethis stood for a moment longer. His jaw worked slightly, the Valathi equivalent of a human grinding their teeth, the scaled plates along his mandibles shifting against each other with a faint mineral sound. See that it stays that way, he said. Then he left. Marcus waited until the door sealed. Then he pulled up his supply logs and began planning the second night's distribution. The numbers needed to hold. 461 divided across 6 distribution points, with delivery windows staggered to avoid pattern detection in the corridor traffic. He'd need to adjust the surplus requisitions. Yesterday's volume had been enough, but today he'd need to draw from Sector 4's buffer as well, and that meant filing a second emergency form with a different justification. He wrote the justification. It was technically true. Everything he did was technically true. The lies were all in what he didn't say. The network grew. By the end of day 2, Talvik had expanded the runner team from 12 to 23. Word had moved through the Drivari community the way it always did, not through comms or screens, but through the quiet current of whispered conversation in water queues, in prayer halls, in the brief moments when bodies pressed close enough in corridors that words could pass between mouths and ears without surveillance picking them up. New runners appeared at the staging points without introduction. They knew the routes. They knew the timing. They'd been moving through these corridors for years. Marcus's operation was simply a new cargo in an existing infrastructure of quiet resistance. The distribution points multiplied. The old creche on 14, the water reclamation bay on 7, the prayer hall on 12, a decommissioned cargo bay on 3 that the children had been using as a play space, the workshop schoolroom on 9, where Keth now served as an unofficial organizer, directing the younger children into orderly rows, checking names against a list he kept in his head. Each point received 2 deliveries per night cycle. Each delivery fed between 30 and 60 children. The runners rotated routes, never using the same corridor sequence twice in succession. Marcus handled the supply chain, the requisitions, the surplus allocations, the careful arithmetic of making official numbers say one thing while the actual flow of goods said another. It was, he realized on the second night, an underground railroad. The phrase surfaced from some history class decades old, some lesson about people who'd done exactly this on Earth, moved bodies and sustenance through hidden channels while the official world pretended everything was accounted for. The scale was different. The technology was different. The principle was identical. When the system declares that certain people don't deserve to eat, you build a system underneath it. On the second night, Marcus went to the prayer hall on 12. Talvek met him there, the old Dravari overseeing the distribution with a quiet authority that the children responded to instinctively. They lined up for him the way they'd once lined up at the terminal, orderly, patient, chits in hand, even though the chits meant nothing here. They keep showing them, Talvek observed, watching a small boy present his folded paper to Setha before accepting his ration block. The chits, even though no scanner reads them. It's what they know, Marcus said. It's the system that was fair to them. You gave them that system. I administered it. The entitlement was always theirs. Talvek made a sound, low, rumbling from deep in his chest, the Dravari equivalent of a considering hum. You say that. Always theirs, as though it is obvious. It is obvious. To you, Talvek turned to face him fully. In the prayer hall's soft light, his dark indigo skin looked almost black, the chalk stains on his fingers pale as bone. To you, human, it is obvious that a child's right to food exists independent of whatever system dispenses it. That taking away the terminal does not take away the entitlement. That bureaucratic reclassification cannot make a child less deserving of being fed. He paused. Do you know how rare that logic is in this galaxy? Marcus didn't answer immediately. He was watching Riva, the mint-green girl, collect her ration block from Setha. She still showed her chit. She still tucked it back into her sleeve after. She still held the block against her chest before eating. The ritual meant something to her that went beyond the food. It is not rare where I come from, Marcus said eventually. It's not even considered logic. It's considered baseline, the floor below which you cannot go. No, Talvek agreed. I'm beginning to understand that. Your species has a floor. He looked at the children, 60 of them in the prayer hall now, arranged in their orderly rows, eating quietly. Most species in this galaxy do not. Most species have only a ceiling, how high they will reach for their own young. Below that ceiling is a void. Your people built a floor in that void and called it obvious. A runner appeared at the hall's side entrance, one of the newer volunteers, young, moving with urgency. She whispered to Setha, who whispered to Talvek, who turned to Marcus with his expression gone still. Patrol, Deck 11 Junction, headed toward the prayer hall's service corridor. Marcus checked his chrono. The patrol wasn't due for another 40 minutes. They'd changed the schedule. How long? 3 minutes. The back exit, the one to the atmospheric processing duct. Is it clear? Talvek gave a sharp hand signal. 2 runners moved, one to the rear door, one to begin collecting the distribution evidence. Empty wrappers, packed casings, anything that said this hall had been more than a prayer service tonight. The children didn't need to be told. They moved with the smooth, silent coordination of small beings who'd learned to disappear. Within 90 seconds, the prayer hall looked like nothing more than a late-night service, benches in rows, the icon light glowing at the altar, 60 children sitting quietly with their hands folded. No food visible, no packs, no evidence. Marcus stood at the hall's main entrance, visible, his humanitarian patch on his shoulder, his badge active. The patrol passed. 2 hegemony soldiers in light armor, bored, routine, not looking for anything specific. They glanced at the prayer hall, saw the human coordinator standing in the doorway. One of them nodded, the professional acknowledgement of someone who technically outranked them in bureaucratic terms but had no actual power. Marcus nodded back. They moved on. Behind him in the hall, 60 small bodies exhaled. Talvik's voice, barely audible, resumed. The third morning arrived, and with it, the Provisional Authority's real response. Marcus knew it was coming when he saw the patrol pattern shift at 0400, twice the usual complement on the lower decks, concentrated around the maintenance corridor access points. Someone had noticed. Not what Marcus was doing specifically. If they knew that, they'd have already come for him, but that something was moving through channels it shouldn't be. The surplus buffer was flagged. The requisition volumes didn't match the sector populations they were filed against. Kethais appeared at 0900. This time he brought 2 compliance officers, heavy-set Valathi in the dark uniforms of the authority's enforcement division. They stood behind him like monuments, unmoving. Coordinator, there have been irregular supply movements logged in the surplus buffer system, quantities that do not align with adjacent sector emergency allocations. Marcus kept his expression neutral. The surplus buffer exists for emergencies. Sector 9's deactivation qualifies. The surplus buffer is not intended to compensate for deliberate deactivation. It is intended for equipment failure and transit delays. The regulation doesn't specify the cause of the shortfall, only that a shortfall exists and that surplus allocation may be redirected to address it. I can show you the relevant clause, subsection 14, paragraph 3, Hegemony Emergency Logistics Protocol. Shall I pull it up? Kethais's jaw worked again. The compliance officers flanked him like statuary, motionless, watching. You are being very precise, coordinator. I am a bureaucrat overseer. Precision is the job. If we discover that supplies are being moved through unauthorized channels, maintenance corridors, service infrastructure, any route not designated for civilian goods transport, your diplomatic status will not protect you. That would constitute infrastructure trespass under Hegemony Military Code. Article 9. Penalty: immediate detention and deportation. Understood. You understand, and yet you seem unconcerned. Marcus looked at him, held the flat dark gaze with his own. He could feel his heartbeat, steady, faster than resting but controlled. The compliance officers were watching his hands. He kept them still on the desk. I understand the law, overseer. I also understand that in 23 hours, you intend to reclassify 461 children as unclaimed authority dependents and transport them to Kesara Minor. I have filed formal objections. I have notified my chain of command on Earth. I have registered my protest through every available channel. He paused. And I will continue to feed those children until the reclassification is confirmed or my mandate is formally revoked. If you wish to revoke it, you know the process. Form 773, submitted to the Interstellar Humanitarian Coordination Office, with a 14-day review period. Kethais stared at him. The scaled plates on his jaw shifted again, that mineral grinding sound. You cannot ration what is already theirs, Marcus said. His voice was quiet, certain, the kind of certainty that comes not from power but from having decided something at a level deeper than strategy, at the level where a man discovers what he will not move from. You can shut down the terminal. You can post guards. You can audit my supply logs, but the entitlement belongs to those children, not to your infrastructure. And as long as I am their coordinator, I will find a way to deliver it. The silence lasted 4 seconds, 5, 6. The compliance officer's eyes moved to Kethais, waiting for an order. None came. Kethais turned and walked out. The compliance officers followed. Marcus let out a breath he hadn't known he was holding. His hands were trembling beneath the desk. He pressed them flat against his thighs until they stopped. Then he opened his comms. Yara, tonight's run moves up 2100, and we add 2 more distribution points, the medical bay on 6 and the ventral observation deck on 15. They won't expect either location. Medical Bay has a night shift crew. They'll see us. The night shift crew on 6 is Dr. Resani. She's Drivari. She lost her own children in the annexation. She'll help. A pause, then on it. And Yara. Yeah. Tell Talvik I need his fastest runners, not the most careful, the fastest. We've got one night left and they're going to be watching the corridors. Copy Marcus when this is over. When this is over, I'll sleep. Tonight I move. The final night was the hardest. The authority had tripled patrols in the maintenance corridors. They'd posted sensor drones at 6 of the 12 access points Talvik's network commonly used, small autonomous units that hovered at junction ceilings and logged thermal signatures passing below. They hadn't sealed the corridors. That would require an infrastructure order from Hegemony Command, which would take days, but they'd made them observable. Marcus stood in Talvik's prayer hall at 2000 hours with a map of the station's lower decks spread across a prayer bench. Talvik was beside him. Setha, Keth, the boy who'd refused to eat on the first night and now served as Marcus's liaison to the older children, 8 other runners. Yara, with her datapad showing real-time patrol positions, she was pulling from the station's public safety network. A feed that was technically available to all sector coordinators, meant for emergency awareness, never intended as a counter-surveillance tool. 6 points are watched, Marcus said, tracing the routes with his finger. But there are 18 access points total on the lower ring. They can't cover them all, they don't have the personnel. They'd need to pull from the upper deck security complement, and that would flag on Hegemony Command's resource allocation monitor. Kethais won't risk that. He wants this quiet. You know their systems well, Talvik observed. I've been filing requisitions through them for 2 years. You learn where the seams are. He traced new routes, longer, more circuitous, through stretches of corridor that were technically outside the maintenance designation because they ran through decommissioned sections. No surveillance, no patrols, no climate control either, which meant they'd be cold and possibly partially depressurized. These sections, one of the runners said, Torin, a young Drivari man barely past majority, lean and fast-moving. Breathing will be thin. 20 minutes of transit at most, Yara said. With standard physiology you'll manage, take slow breaths. Don't run, walk fast. Drivari physiology handles thin atmosphere better than human, Talvik said. We evolved on a high-altitude world. The runners will be fine. He looked at Marcus. You, however, should not go. Marcus shook his head. I'm going. Deck 14, the creche. That's the largest group and the most exposed. If a patrol finds the distribution in progress, I need to be there. My face, my mandate, my diplomatic status, that's the shield. A runner gets caught, they're detained. I get caught, it becomes an interstellar incident. A shield they have told you will not hold. It'll hold long enough for the children to scatter. It'll hold long enough for the runner to get clear. After that, he shrugged. After that, the 72 hours will be up regardless, and whatever happens next is a political fight, not a logistics one. Talvik studied him for a long moment. Then he reached into his robe and drew out something, a small carved figurine, no larger than a finger joint. Pale stone, worn smooth by generations of handling. It depicted a Drivari child with arms raised, reaching toward something above and beyond the frame. An old prayer hall icon, the kind that families passed down, the kind that had survived the annexation hidden in clothing and wall cavities. Carry this, Talvik said. The children will know what it means. It means one of ours sent you. It means trust what this person brings. Marcus took it. It weighed almost nothing, like the children. He tucked it into his jacket pocket, over his heart, beside the badge that said he had the right to be here. 2100 hours, the network moved. 23 runners dispersed from 7 staging points across 4 sectors. Each carried 30 to 50 ration packs in thermal-insulated carriers. They moved through the routes they'd planned that evening. the decommissioned sections, the unwatched access points, the stretches of station infrastructure that nobody had used in years because nobody had needed to. Marcus moved with Setha and Torin through the Deck 14 route. The decommissioned section was everything they'd been warned about, cold enough that his breath misted, dark except for the emergency floor-track lighting that pulsed amber every 10 meters, and silent in a way that meant the atmospheric processors had been shut down. Air was thin. His lungs worked harder with each step. His head felt light at the margins, not dangerous, not yet, but present. A reminder that this corridor existed in the space between designed and forgotten. They moved fast. Setha led, she knew this route by memory, counting steps between turns, her pointed ears rotating toward every sound. Torin brought up the rear, his carrier slung low to keep his center of gravity stable on the section's slightly uneven decking. The crash yard emerged ahead of them, the ventilation access panel, the oiled hinges. Setha opened it. Marcus went through first, his pack heavy on his shoulders, his breath coming faster than it should. The children were waiting. Not scattered across the floor as they'd been the first night. This time they were sitting in rows, orderly, quiet, facing the access panel. Someone had told them. The corridor network that carried sound faster than comms had carried this too. Tonight is the last night. Be ready, be quiet, be fast. 41 small bodies, 41 sets of eyes catching the dim light, 41 pairs of hands ready to receive. Marcus set down his pack. Setha and Torin flanked him, unpacking with practiced efficiency, 4 minutes for a full distribution. They'd gotten fast at this. The rhythm was down. Open the carrier, section the blocks by cluster, pass them hand to hand through the rows. Quiet, practiced. A machine built in 3 nights from nothing but necessity. Riva was in the front row. She held up her chit. Marcus crouched to her level. This small, serious child who kept showing her paper to a system that no longer existed, who insisted on the ritual, because the ritual was the last thing that said the universe had rules. Riva, he said, keep it forever, you understand. That says you are owed, no matter what anyone tells you, no matter what system they put you in or what terminal they shut down. That paper says you were counted, you were seen. You were fed because it was right, not because it was convenient. She looked at him with those amber eyes, steady, ancient in their patience. Then she folded the chit one more time, smaller, tighter, and pushed it deep into her sleeve where it pressed against her wrist like a secret held against a pulse. She took her ration block. Marcus stood. His comms buzzed once, Yara's all-clear signal. 14 of the 23 runners had completed their drops. The remaining 9 were inbound to their distribution points. The system was working. 1 more hour and every child under his mandate would be fed for the night, the last night that mattered. Then his comms buzzed again, 3 times in rapid succession. Patrol alert, Deck 14, inbound. Move, he said to Setha. Get them to the back alcoves, don't run, walk, quietly. Setha was already in motion, her hands gentle on small shoulders, her whispers precise and calm, guiding children toward the creche's rear sections where the old nap rooms offered cover. Torin gathered the empty packs, evidence, and shoved them through the ventilation panel, pulling it shut behind them with a soft click. Marcus stood in the center of the yard, alone, hands at his sides, visible. He straightened his jacket, made sure the humanitarian patch was showing, activated his badge beacon, became, deliberately, the most official-looking thing in the room. The patrol came through the main entrance, the one that was supposed to be locked, the one that hadn't been used officially in a year. 2 compliance officers in their dark uniforms, and behind them, stepping through the doorway with the controlled precision of someone who'd planned this moment, Kethais. The overseer stopped 3 meters from Marcus. His flat dark eyes swept the yard, empty now, or apparently empty. The children and Setha were behind walls, in alcoves. silent with the practiced quiet of small beings who'd learned to be invisible long before Marcus arrived. Coordinator Vale. Overseer. You are in a decommissioned facility at 21:40 hours, on a night when irregular supply movements have been detected in the maintenance infrastructure. I'm conducting a welfare check on unaccompanied minors in their registered shelter location. This creche is still listed on their registration documents as a designated gathering space. My mandate authorizes welfare visits at any hour, subsection 6, paragraph 12. There is no one here. Marcus tilted his head slightly. The children are sleeping. In the rear rooms. As children do at this hour, I check on them, I make sure they're safe, then I leave. It's routine. Kethise's jaw ground. He looked at his compliance officers. One of them held a scanner, the kind that detected thermal signatures through walls. The kind that would show 41 small bodies huddled in the back rooms, their temperatures slightly elevated from recent movement and from pressing together in clusters. Scan the facility, Kethise said. The officer raised the scanner, swept it toward the rear wall. Marcus stepped into the scan path. Not aggressively, not dramatically. He simply moved one step to the right, placing his body between the scanner and the back rooms. His UN patch was visible on his shoulder. His identification beacon was active, broadcasting his diplomatic credentials on the frequency that every hegemony device was calibrated to receive and respect. Overseer, he said. His voice was still quiet, still certain, the absolute absence of bluster. Those children are under my humanitarian mandate until 0800 tomorrow morning. Their location is registered. Their welfare is my responsibility. If you wish to scan their sleeping quarters while they are in my care, you may file a request through the Interstellar Humanitarian Coordination Office, Form 19, Section C, and receive authorization within 5 to 7 business days. Kethise's scales flushed darker at the edges, the color change moving outward from his jaw in a wave. Anger, but contained. Because the human was right. Because the forms were real. Because somewhere in the hegemony's own legal architecture, someone had written protections that technically still applied for the next 10 hours, and this one human knew every line of them. By 0800 tomorrow, the reclassification will be confirmed, Kethise said. Yes, Marcus agreed. It will, and at 0801 you may process them however the authority sees fit, and I will have no legal standing to prevent it. A beat, the compliance officer's scanner arm hung in the air, uncommitted. But until then, Marcus continued, they are mine, and I will be here in this room conducting my welfare check until I am satisfied that every child under my mandate has been seen and accounted for and safe. Is there anything else, Overseer? The silence stretched. The scanner arm lowered. Kethise stared at Marcus with something that wasn't anger anymore, something that looked more like the expression of a man watching a wall that should have buckled and finding it still standing. One human, he said, without fully turning away. One human, and you've made this into something that requires my personal attention at 2100 hours. He didn't finish the thought. He walked out. The compliance officers followed, their boots heavy on the creche's flooring. The door sealed. Marcus stood still for a full 30 seconds. His hands were shaking. He pressed them flat against his thighs until they stopped. His heartbeat was loud in his ears, the sound of a body catching up to what the mind had already done. Then he walked to the back rooms. The children were there, all 41, pressed together in the nap room alcoves, silent, watching him with luminous eyes. Setha was among them, her hands on the smallest shoulders, her own breathing barely controlled. Riva was in the front cluster, her ration block half-eaten, her chit sleeve pressed against her chest. They're gone, Marcus said. 41 small bodies exhaled at once. The sound was barely audible, just a collective settling, a release of held breath from 41 small sets of lungs simultaneously. relief expressed as atmospheric pressure dropping by a fraction. Marcus sat down on the floor. He was tired in a way that went to the marrow, 36 hours without sleep, 3 nights of crawling through decommissioned corridors, the weight of 461 names on a list that might mean nothing by morning. Reva appeared beside him. She didn't speak. She sat close enough that her shoulder, tiny, sharp-boned, pressed against his arm. Her warmth was different from a human child's, cooler, steadier, like touching river-smooth stone in spring. She leaned into him with the weight of someone who'd made a decision about where safety lived. He let her stay. At 0200 his comms chirped, "Yara. All 23 runners home safe. All distribution points cleared. Full delivery confirmed, 461 rations distributed. 0 interceptions. 0 detentions." Marcus closed his eyes. Every one. Every single one. Talvek's people tracked the count against your master registry. Every registered child under your mandate received a ration pack tonight. Complete coverage. 3 nights running. Good, his voice was rough. He swallowed against the tightness in his throat. That's good. Marcus, what happens at 0800? He didn't answer immediately. Reva was still pressed against his arm, her breathing slowed to the rhythm of a child drifting toward sleep. 40 other small bodies arranged around the naproom alcoves, some already sleeping, some watching him with those steady alien eyes that held no judgment, only the patient expectation of someone who decided he was worth watching. At 0800, he said, the Interstellar Court of Humanitarian Jurisdiction receives my emergency injunction filing. Yara, I've been drafting it for 6 days, since before the terminal went dark. Since the moment I saw the requisition patterns that told me the authority was planning to cut 9. I didn't need 72 hours to feed them. I needed 72 hours to buy time for the filing to process. Silence on the line. Then you planned this. The feeding is real. The defiance is real. Every ration delivered is evidence. But the endgame was always legal, not logistical. The injunction requires proof of active, continuous care, documentary evidence that the mandate holder maintained unbroken physical custody and welfare provision throughout the entire contested period. Every night we ran the underground. Every distribution point, every runner, every ration delivered is logged, time-stamped, georeferenced through my badge beacon. The logs prove that I never abandoned the mandate, that the children never went unfed, that the authorities' disruption did not sever the care chain for a single hour. So the reclassification cannot proceed while an injunction is pending before the court. The review process takes a minimum of 90 days. During those 90 days, the children remain under my mandate, under interstellar humanitarian law. Protected. Yara was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was thick. 90 days. 90 days to make the political case, to get Earth's delegation to the Assembly, to bring press coverage to Cassara Minor, real coverage, the kind that makes the hegemony's allies uncomfortable. 90 days to make it more expensive to take these children than to leave them alone. And if the court denies the injunction? Marcus looked down. Reva was fully asleep now, her weight steady against him, her chit sleeve still clutched in her small fist, the folded paper visible at the cuff, soft, worn, the last receipt from a system that had treated her like she mattered. Then I file another one, on different grounds, and another after that. And I keep filing, and I keep feeding them through whatever mechanism exists or whatever mechanism I build. And I keep being the most inconvenient, most procedurally exhausting human being in this system, until someone with more authority than Kethai's decides it's easier to leave the children where they are than to fight me for them. That could take years, Marcus. Then it takes years. Another silence. Then Yara's voice, barely a whisper. Okay, I'll have the filing transmitted at 0759. 1 minute before the deadline. not a second before. Let them think they've won until the very last moment. Understood. Get some sleep, Marcus. I will after. He didn't sleep. He sat on the floor of the old creche nap room while 41 children breathed around him, and the station's artificial night held steady outside the walls. His body ached, shoulders from the pack weight, lungs from the thin air, spine from the hard floor. But Reva was warm against his arm, and the room was quiet, and for 6 hours nothing needed to happen except being present. At 0700 the first children began to wake. They stirred in their clusters, small movements, quiet sounds, the sleepy mumbles of a language Marcus had never fully learned but understood in the way you understand any child's morning. Confused, warm, not yet ready. Eyes opening, finding him still there. Some of them looked surprised. Most didn't. He was the human from the line. He stayed. At 0730, Talvik arrived through the ventilation panel. He looked at Marcus, still sitting on the floor, Reva still curled against his side, 40 children waking around him, and said nothing for a moment. Then he set down a small container of heated broth. Drivari breakfast, not a ration block. A real meal prepared in someone's quarters, carried here warm. For you, Talvik said. You look like you have not eaten in 3 days. I haven't. Eat. You have made yourself into the thin wall between them and the machine. A wall should not be hollow. Marcus took the broth. It was mild, herbal, with a faintly mineral undertone that was purely Drivari. He drank it. His stomach received it with the desperate gratitude of a body that had been running on will alone. At 0759, somewhere across the station in a communications bay, Yara Kenning pressed a transmit key. The emergency injunction, 43 pages of legal argument, documentary evidence, care chain verification, timestamp distribution logs, and a direct petition to the Interstellar Court of Humanitarian Jurisdiction, launched through the relay system at lightspeed toward the nearest court receiving node. At 0800, Kethise's reclassification order reached its activation timestamp and triggered, and met, in the same processing cycle, the court's automatic injunction hold notification. The processing froze mid-execution. The reclassification hung in limbo, neither confirmed nor denied. Pending. At 0804, Marcus's comms buzzed. An official notification from the court, formatted in the cold, precise language of interstellar jurisprudence. Injunction received. Case OPENED. Review initiated. Mandate status, preserved pending final determination. Estimated review timeline, 9120 standard days. No changes to protected minor status permitted during review period. He read it twice. Then he stood slowly, because Reva was still half asleep against his leg, and he didn't want to startle her, and walked to the yard. The morning light was coming through the creche's high windows. Not real morning light, station light, filtered through panels designed to simulate a planetary dawn cycle. But it was bright enough, warm enough, golden enough to make the foam mats glow, and the children's skin catch color, mint and blue and pale lavender in the light. 41 children ate their ration blocks in that light. Some of them talked quietly to each other for the first time in 3 days, small voices, halting conversations in Drivari that Marcus caught fragments of. Some of them played, a small game involving stacking nutrient paste tubes into towers, the rules of which seemed to involve blowing gently on the top tube without toppling the structure. Some of them just sat and ate and looked at the light, and existed in the simple animal relief of being fed and being present, and being left alone. Reva appeared at his side. She held up her chit one last time. You can still use that, Marcus told her. The terminal will be back online within the week. I'll make sure of it. She nodded. Then, with the gravity of someone performing a ceremony whose meaning only she fully understood, she reached toward Marcus's hand, the one that had absently pulled the carved figurine from his pocket and was holding it, the smooth, pale stone warm from his body heat. She took it gently, turned it over in her small fingers, studied the child with raised arms. Then she tucked it into her sleeve alongside the chit. Two objects pressed against her wrist, one that said she was owed, and one that said someone came. Marcus didn't correct her. It wasn't his anymore. It had never been his. It belonged to the space between a man who decided and a child who was waiting for someone to decide. 3 days later, the Sector 9 distribution terminal came back online. Marcus stood at the head of the line, clipboard in hand, counting names. The children queued, orderly, patient, chits ready. The compliance officers were gone. Kethais had been reassigned to an administrative post on the outer ring, a lateral move that everyone understood was a demotion. The underground network stayed in place. It didn't dismantle. The routes, the runners, the distribution points, Talvik kept them maintained, kept the runners practiced, kept the access panels oiled and the timing memorized. In case, he said when Marcus asked why. In case. You cannot ration what is already theirs, Talvik said, echoing Marcus's words back to him with the exact cadence and weight of a teacher who has decided something is worth preserving in memory, worth teaching. Your words, human, we heard them. The children heard them. They have become structural, part of how we understand what is owed. Marcus looked at the line. 461 children queued in the station's morning light, holding their papers, waiting to be counted. Some of them waved. Some of them just watched him with those steady eyes. All of them were there. All of them were fed. All of them were his. Good, he said. He picked up his clipboard. He began to count. The ration chit in Rivaz's sleeve stayed there for 14 years, long after she'd outgrown the need for it, long after the interstellar court ruled permanently in Marcus's favor, long after Cassara Minor was shut down and investigated, and its architects prosecuted, long after the Dravari homeworld began its reconstruction, and the orphans of the annexation grew into adults who remembered what it meant to be counted. She kept it because it said she was owed, because a human had crawled through a cold corridor with food on his back and knelt on a creche floor and said, "Keep this. This says you are." Because the underground had moved when one human said the words out loud, and the words had become structural, and the structure had held. 14 years later, standing before the Galactic Assembly as the youngest Dravari ambassador ever appointed, Ravaz reached into her formal robe and produced 2 items, a folded ration chit, translucent with handling, and a small stone figurine of a child with arms raised. She set them on the podium. "These are my credentials," she said. "One says I was owed, the other says someone came." The assembly fell silent. 461 children had been fed through 3 nights on a station that said they didn't deserve it. One human had built a railroad under the floor of a system that declared them invisible. The rest, the injunctions, the investigations, the liberation, the long years of rebuilding, all of that was consequence. All of that grew from a man who looked at a dead terminal and a small child holding a paper and decided that the paper was still good. The logistics had been the love.